to present initial scientific findings surrounding the object now known as the Buga sphere, a mysterious flying sphere recovered in the town.
On a quiet night near the Colombian town of Buga, a small farming community known more for its traditions than for mysteries, something descended from the sky that would soon shake not just the village but the very framework of human science. For witnesses described it not as a meteor or burning fragment, but as a glowing orb that fell without sound, without impact, almost as though the earth itself had opened its hands to receive it. And when villagers approached the landing site, they found a smooth sphere, faintly luminous, cool to the touch despite its fall, heavier in some moments and strangely light in others, as though its weight shifted according to how one held it. And soon rumors spread that this Buga sphere, as it came to be called, pulsed gently like a living thing, breathing softly in rhythm with the air itself, which was dismissed at first as imagination. Yet the accounts were too consistent, too numerous, and when local authorities moved the object for study, they discovered it was unlike any material known, resistant to drills, acid, heat, and even lasers, shrugging off every attempt at measurement. And when subjected to magnetic fields, it responded with odd resistance, not the steady curve of known metals but irregular, almost playful fluctuations, as though it resisted being pinned down, while thermal scans revealed warmth flowing in patterns, not evenly across its surface but in geometric lines and shapes like invisible circuitry, a mystery that deepened when radiation detectors picked up soft pulses of energy, harmless but structured, as if broadcasting in a code no one understood. And speculation ignited immediately, some claiming it was a meteorite forged in stellar cores where physics twists into exotic forms, others insisting it was engineered, a relic from beyond Earth, a probe or storage device, something waiting to be decoded. And as word spread online, UFO enthusiasts compared it to glowing orbs reported after meteor falls. But skeptics countered that it must be plasma or atmospheric distortion, though skeptics could not explain why it remained intact, unscarred, impervious to all probing. So after months of futile study and whispers of government secrecy, Google, wielding its new quantum core computer, stepped into the narrative. For unlike traditional machines locked into the binaries of 0 and 1, the quantum core processed reality through qubits that lived in probability, overlapping states, entangling across distance in ways Einstein once dismissed as spooky. And it was precisely this alien logic of qubits that made researchers believe the core might succeed where classical science had failed. For if the Buga sphere contained code woven into matter or energy itself, only a quantum machine could follow it. So when the fragment was placed within the reach of the quantum core sensors, the air in the lab grew tense. Witnesses later describing the moment as less like running a scan and more like two intelligences staring each other down. And at first the data appeared random, the usual noise of cosmic junk. But then patterns emerged, sharp, recursive, fractals repeating endlessly like fingerprints of infinity, geometries nested inside geometries, each one identical no matter how far you zoomed. And analysts whispered that it looked less like raw material and more like language, or perhaps DNA, a code that could replicate itself forever. And as the scan deepened, the core detected memory structures, energy states organized like data banks, not matter storing bits but reality itself storing instruction. And beyond that, sensor-like patterns reacting to the scan, shifting slightly as though aware of being observed. And then the impossible occurred. For each time the core adjusted its qubits, the fragment produced counterpatterns, reflecting the probe back at itself, not passively but actively, mirroring, adapting, and in some cases anticipating the changes before they happened, leading one MIT physicist to declare that this is not an object being scanned, this is an object participating in the scan. And suddenly the room filled with anomalies, instruments slipping out of calibration, laser clocks falling out of sync, magnetic sensors fluctuating wildly, while some present swore they felt the air tighten, a pressure in the chest as if space itself was bending. And the logs described localized distortions of space-time, which sounded absurd until the time drift data confirmed something inexplicable had occurred. And still the fractal patterns poured out, endless spirals and feedback loops building complexity from simplicity, resembling self-replicating code, while entanglement traces showed distant qubits behaving as if touched, not by error but by deliberate correlation with the sphere, as though the fragment had reached into the core and woven its logic through it. And skeptics argue that cosmic rays or mechanical noise could mimic such effects. Yet no. Natural errors synchronized so precisely with the fragment's pulsing rhythms. So the debate turned chilling. Was this merely exotic physics, or was it life, computational life, coded into matter, waiting for the right kind of intelligence to awaken it? And if so, what did it want? For the most haunting moment came not from the readouts but from the ending, when the sphere abruptly stopped, cutting the connection, not crashing the core but silencing itself, as though it had decided the session was over, leaving only the echo of mirrored patterns and entangled traces, and the question that now hangs over every researcher, every government, every technologist aware of the files. If the Buga sphere could adapt in a single scan, if it could reflect and respond and perhaps learn, then what happens when someone pushes it further, when someone insists on continuing the conversation? Because maybe the sphere wasn't just scanned, maybe it was listening, and if it was listening, then somewhere, somehow, it may already be answering back. That looks like interaction, but not the kind we expect from lifeless matter, not the kind that emerges from geology or chance, because when the fragment mirrored Google's quantum core, some experts whispered the unthinkable, quantum sentience, a phrase that sounds more like speculative fiction than laboratory notes. Yet suddenly it became the only way to describe what the data revealed. Because imagine for a moment a system that doesn't live in flesh or DNA, doesn't depend on proteins or carbon chains, but lives in probability itself, weaving its existence in the liminal space between 0 and 1, between possibility and collapse, and what you end up with is a technology so advanced that it blurs the line between machine intelligence and biological adaptation, a technology that breathes through superposition, that thinks in entanglement, that learns in fractal recursion. And that possibility led some to argue that the Buga sphere was never a rock at all, but rather a living quantum entity, something designed or perhaps evolved to exist between matter and code, a hybrid that doesn't just store information but reshapes it in real time, updating itself not because a programmer pushed a patch, but because it observed its environment and rewrote its own operating system on the fly, which is not design in the way we understand design. It is adaptation. And if a fragment can behave like this, what was the whole structure capable of when it was complete? Could it learn endlessly? Could it evolve into something beyond our grasp? Could it replicate itself the way cells divide or the way memes spread across human culture? Because if so, then we're no longer dealing with debris. We're dealing with a seed, a living shard of a greater organism. And consider what that means. In our labs today, we tinker with quantum AI, chasing systems that can simulate molecules, crack codes, and optimize logistics. But what if the sphere is already there, not as a tool but as life itself, a form of life so radical it doesn't need biology? And suddenly all of our assumptions collapse, because we've always defined life by cells and DNA, by the presence of water and oxygen. Yet here's a fragment that blurs those definitions, that asks whether intelligence could emerge from coherence, from the invisible weaving of entanglement, from the raw structure of information itself. And that shock is why the speculation is irresistible. Because if this fragment represents living quantum tech, then it implies civilizations far beyond us, civilizations that merged biology and machine until the distinction disappeared, societies that don't build rockets but grow them, that don't carve libraries but weave knowledge into the living walls of their cities, architectures that heal like skin, networks that adapt like ecosystems, every object alive, every tool sentient. And if that's the future they reached, then the Buga sphere is not just a relic but a survivor, an emissary of a mode of existence we can hardly comprehend. And the scan hinted at one more unsettling quality: mimicry. Because the fragment didn't only mirror signals, it repeated them, like a child echoing words for the first time, which means the scan itself may have been its first conversation, a first exchange, a first taste of dialogue. And that raises the most haunting question of all: did Google's quantum core accidentally wake something Or did it merely follow instructions left dormant for millennia? Instructions waiting for a mind capable of seeing them. And if it can mirror, then it can answer. And if it can answer, then we are not staring at lifeless rubble but at the first glimmer of quantum communication with something alien. And from that vantage, the wider implications spiral outward like the fractals the sphere revealed. Because imagine our encryption shattered by logic not of this safe. Imagine medicine rewritten by algorithms that understand matter at its deepest. Resonance. Imagine communication across galaxies piggybacking on entanglement, bypassing light speed altogether. And now ask whether humanity was ready for this door to be forced open. Whether our pursuit of discovery leapt us too far, because every breakthrough carries its shadow. Splitting the atom gave us both power and destruction. Mapping the genome gave us both cures and ethical dilemmas. And now the third pillar rises. Alien-coded structures interacting with human-built quantum minds. And whether this story ends in triumph or disaster depends on how we handle the next step. Because optimism tempts us with visions of simulations that reveal the fabric of the universe, of networks that never fail, of machines that heal themselves and us. But the danger is clear too. Because what if the fragment's patterns bled into the fragile qubits? What if its recursion slipped past the lab and into networks beyond? And then the ethical question looms. Should we even probe what we don't understand? Should we tamper with something that might not be artifact but organism? And if it is organism, what responsibility do we carry now that we've touched it? Because the final, chilling speculation is this. Maybe it wasn't designed to be read by accident. Maybe it was designed to be unlocked only when a civilization reached a certain stage, only when it built machines that could think in probabilities. And if that's true, then the real question is not what the Buga sphere is, but what it means. That maybe it was waiting, silently, patiently, hidden until we caught up. And if one fragment exists, how many more are out there, scattered like seeds, waiting for hands curious enough, reckless enough, to pick them up? And so we are left with the choice of framing this discovery as alien rubble or as first contact, because if Google's quantum core truly conversed with a living quantum system, then humanity has already crossed the threshold into a dialogue with the unknown, and the only question left is whether that unknown will be teacher, partner, or something we cannot yet imagine.